Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. Ladies and gentlemen, just ahead of my flight, I found a place in a very quaint cafe near the airport in Goa. And we must thank, they call themselves the Goan Oven. And quite good food and nice hot cup of coffee, but all of that is later. Let's look at the agenda. First up, the SCO summit comes to a close. The larger question is, has India set the right tone? Have they taken the right stand when we say that the 4-point agenda for the summit in Delhi on the 3rd and 4th of July will be between de-radicalisation to digitisation? So the entire gamut of what actually matters beyond the conflict areas, beyond the expansionism, beyond the narratives, have they actually got the whole story right, the objective of that which the SCO was actually founded nearly 3 decades ago. This also includes a reform of the SCO, more member nations now coming in, not just as observers, but also participants, active participants. The scope of the SCO, we had spoken about it last evening, is only growing broader and wider. But all this, even as China-Pakistan combined, continues to push its own narrative into this entire SCO, and somewhere it wants to corner India, and that's very evident. Some statements made by the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, also very strong and explosive. We will talk about that, but let's go straight across to our experts who would have more to say from the Russian point of view. Ben Aris is with us, Einar Tangen, to bring us China's perspective. But first to Ambassador Kamal Sibal, who will be looking in and weighing in both on the India aspect and what Pakistan tried to do. Their, attempt at gamesmanship. Every time they come on a multilateral forum, they try and smoke the peace pipe, but then they come back and try and wield the sword or have a dagger in the other hand. It's typical of the Pakistanis to do that, but the story is India. So let me ask you, Kaval Sibalji, has India set the tone right? Has India got its agenda right when the foreign minister in his opening remarks said, these are the 4 main aspects on which we would like your the nations to try and opine and also agree to, that could be taken up at the summit level talks in July? Starting with de-radicalisation, and of course then the point number 4 is digital transformation. In between came sustainability and mutual cooperation, and of course talking about millets and so many other aspects. But your thoughts, sir?
Well, India should be a responsible partner and look for ways in which the SCO member countries, as well as dialogue partners and others, can forge positive areas of cooperation. It should not become a platform for anti-Western propaganda or laying on the table all the grievances and grouses that countries may legitimately have with regard to the manner in which the West is pursuing its agenda. But then the value of this organization, the purpose and the future of the organization will get compromised, because then it will appear as if this organization, instead of sticking to its agenda of peaceful resolution of disputes, non-interference in the internal affairs of countries, respect for sovereignty, in fact dealing with each other in a manner in which they avoid dealing the way the West deals with others, trying to dominate, push its agenda, impose values and things like that. Now, if this becomes overtly an anti-Western organization, then it will divide the international community even more and raise more polemics. This is not in the interest of everyone. The fact that this organization exists, is expanding, in itself means that that multipolarity is being built up. And more countries are feeling attracted to join an organization in which the West is absent. This is very important. So I think India has set the right tone in trying to focus on positive issues, economic issues, cooperative issues, and not divisive issues. And this formulation of de-radicalization to digitalization, I think, is very beautifully worded. Our concerns on terrorism remain. And we've also talked about focusing on startups, traditional medicine, youth empowerment, Buddhist heritage, science and technology, and things like that. There's a lot of potential in this agenda. And if we work on that, then you can forge ties of cooperation between the member countries, which itself will then advance their shared interests rather than getting locked into the kind of disputes and politics that the Pakistani foreign minister was trying to do. Now, this business about Pakistan being a peaceful country, nobody buys it. I mean, they're speaking to themselves, to their own audience. Who's buying it? Of course, China is a friend, and Russia is becoming a little soft on them. Therefore, they may feel that they can get away with it, but it's not. Real concern, shared concern on terrorism emanating from Afghanistan with links with Pakistan is very much on the forefront, even of the Chinese, not to mention the Russians, of course, as well as Central Asian states. And Pakistan's role is well known, and they just can't cover it up.
Right. Right. Ben Arus, let's just quickly bring in the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov. What's going to remain with the people? What he said inside the meeting or what he said during the Q&A?
I think the significance is Lavrov went at all. It's a key element of what Putin's trying to do now that he's been sanctioned and cut off from traditional markets. And he's looking to expand and replace those lost markets in the West with those in the emerging world. And at the same time, he's been banging on about his ideas of multipolar world as opposed to the unipolar world, which is led by the states. And so his mere presence there is a sign that Russia is investing heavily in building up these relationships. I mean, you have to appreciate the enormity of the change that Russia has been through in so much as this entire energy infrastructure, what earns it the bulk of its money, was pointed at the West. 70% of Russia's oil and gas was delivered to Europe. And that's been cut off, that's gone. And so Russia's trying to rebuild itself. And it's been pariahed by the West. I mean, everything's, only a few things have been sanctioned, but, West has stopped trading with Russia almost entirely. And so it's both political and economic. It needs new markets, and the emerging world is growing very fast and providing those markets. But at the same time, it needs political allies. And as our colleague mentioned, actually that's being warmly welcomed in the emerging world because there's a deeper issue here. I think the emerging markets are fed up with being treated as second-class citizens in the geopolitical infrastructure. The UN is based in New York, the WHO is based in Geneva, and it's all dominated by Westerners and Europeans, even though they're nominally multilateral. I think the 70% of the world's population is in emerging markets, but it has 15% of the votes in these organizations. And consequently, Russia and China together, they're the two emerging markets that sit at top table. Specifically, you can look at the UN Security Council, that there's 3 European countries, the US plus China, no one from Africa, no one from Latin America. And so emerging world is looking to China and Russia, who do sit at top table, partly because of their nuclear capabilities. And they want to have their say. They buy into this multinational that it shouldn't be the Americans dictating to everyone. It should be around a big table and done as a community on the basis of consensus. So we're in a very interesting time now where geopolitical relationships are being massively reorganized, or there's an attempt to reorganize. And then the SCO the meeting is an important part of that because, again, my colleague mentioned, there's no Western presence involved at all. It's the same with the BRICS summit that's due to be held in South Africa in August. The Americans applied to attend and they were refused. The emerging world is like, no, we're building our own institutions now. And so together, we actually will have a lot more clout. And that's partly a reaction to the extremity of the sanctions that have been put on Russia because everybody's vulnerable to those. But it's also part of the ongoing development. India's come on by leaps and bounds. And it's not an emerging market anymore. It's emerged. I mean, there's still a lot of work to do ahead of it. Nevertheless, we're in a new era now where these countries, all of them, China, India, Belarus, Iran, they all want their say. They have their own interests. But they don't have the weaponry nor the money that the West does. And it's using that leverage that it's had for 500 years since the Industrial Revolution. But I'm afraid I think that period has passed. And so we're in the middle now of this process of remaking things. But then the members of SCO, of BRICS, of Asian countries, there's lots of issues still. They're not obvious partners. The India-Pakistan tensions is going to be a problem. The India China sanctions is going to be a problem, and all this stuff needs to be worked out. But I think it's very significant that the Pakistani foreign minister came, and it shows that there's a common interest of like getting past these problems. The cooperation needs to be done, and that's a very healthy thing. But again, diplomatically, there's as much work to do left as there is economically.
Absolutely, but one of the comments that stood out for me was for Sergei Lavrov during the Q&A, call out America as the open sponsor or backing ISIS and also the East Turkestan Islamic movement. Does that indicate, Einar Tangen, that China is able to get Russia to echo its voice? China has also got Pakistan to say what it wants it to say. So is China now increasingly trying to exert its influence across the SCO member nations?
China and Russia are in position. I mean, the war of words between the Kremlin and the White House has been ongoing, and they take relations are dead. Diplomatic relations are in effect being broken off because they are in effect at war with each other, and so they're taking every opportunity to take potshots. And you also have to appreciate that Lavrov's comments are also aimed at the domestic market, because Putin is in an uncomfortable position there in so much as he's wrecked the prosperity of Russia. And given the sanctions won't come off in my lifetime, I believe, that there's going to be an attrition to the standard of living, and Russians have got used to living a European standard of life, and that's going to go, which puts Putin difficult domestic position in so much as he's facing possible dissent, protests, anti-war movement, which hasn't really shown itself, but it's there, it's lingering, it's under the surface.
Ben, let me get Einar Tangen in. Mr. Tangen, Einar Tangen, can you hear me? How would you want to see what's happening, how it played out, the SCO foreign ministers meet? Has China been able to weigh in and get nations to say what it wants it to say?
No, China would like to listen to what other countries have to say. I mean, when history looks back on this summit, they'll judge it based on this was a regional grouping of global South countries and some East Asian countries, Central Asian countries, who were coming together to try to figure out how they can work together. I would agree with my first colleague who said that it shouldn't be reduced to a bunch of petty side issues, that their eyes should be on how these countries can cooperate. The multilateral world is a fact. The question is, how is it shaped? And it is at conferences like this that countries have to put aside all of their petty differences, all of their bilateral differences, and try to figure out how the world is going to work, both in terms of security, respect, and also development.
There are some videos that have come to the fore now on a day when Bilawal Bhutto made that statement and tried to underline the aspect of self-determination without mentioning Kashmir, protection of minorities, etc., etc. There are 4 or 5 videos that have come to the fore. Our investigations editor Manoj Gupta getting us pictures of protests at the Lahore Press Club. Huge protests that have been done by the minority community because they believe, and what they're alleging is brazen misuse of the blasphemy law, and they're also wanting forced conversion to be stopped. And these leaders are saying that the temples, churches are being attacked. There are also a video of an Ahmadi mosque that's been broken down. This is coming in from Mirpur Khas in Sindh. There are protests in the Astor district in Gilgit-Baltistan, where the killing of a young man has now really rattled everybody up, and because two boys went missing, one is still missing, and the other's dead body turned up, and there are huge protests on the ground, and this body was found on the 2nd of May in Jotial in Gilgit. Then there are also protests which are happening as a person from Pak-occupied Kashmir. He hails from Muzaffarabad, was beaten up brutally, and this happened in Islamabad. And this was because he's a native of POK. He was beaten up in Islamabad on the 23rd of April because he commented on the economic hardship that Pakistan is going through, saying that even the greatest of the saints cannot pull Pakistan out of it. And then they started beating him up, saying you showed disrespect to one of our saints. So this is the treatment that minorities, people are being treated, and we're not even counting the instances with the Baloch, Kanwal Sibalji. So when Bilawal Bhutto makes such statements on an official platform, aren't they opening up to further ridicule? Can they preach what they never practice?
Look, they have said far worse things on the UN General Assembly platform. And Bilawal Bhutto himself, former Prime Minister Imran Khan, far more vicious. This is nothing. And with regard to self-determination, minorities, and this and that, they have said it before, even in the SCO meetings. So this is nothing new. And if they didn't say it, he would be pilloried back home, that you went there and you missed the opportunity to make your points. Now, from our side, when we talk about cross-border terrorism and accountability for those who harbor terrorists and this and that and that, the message is clear. Who are we targeting? We are targeting Pakistan. So I therefore don't see it as any great problem that Bhutto said what he said.
Let us see how it all pans out and what's there in the fine print eventually at the summit level talks, because there's a lot of time between May and today, that is the 5th of May, and of course the 3rd and 4th of July. Kanwal Sibalji, always a pleasure talking with you. Ben Aris and Anna Tangen, thank you very, very much. Quickly, ladies and gentlemen, I've got the clock ticking on me because we've got